You got to remember, I don't know what genetics is. They kept throwing this genetics thing. Or, you got great genetics. You got great potential. Potential and genetics will only get you so far in this industry.
Right.
You have to figure out the diet, the training.
So you didn't let this get to your head?
No, I wanted more. The more I heard it, the more I believed in it. And if you don't buy into the belief of the positive reinforcement, you're not going to go to the places that they think you can go.
You were doing hard things because you knew it was training you mentally, not
100%.
necessarily because it was going to change your body, but the mental training of it.
My mentor was a bodybuilder, a grown man who's traveling the world, who had a little bit of time for me. He disappeared a year and a half into my journey. So I have to figure this stuff out on my own. I went to almost every show every weekend by myself. It wasn't a group sport. But when you love something, you're not looking for people to come along with you.
Right. I would like to introduce you to my friend, Shawn Ray. Shawn Ray is known for being a controversial figure in the bodybuilding world. He speaks his mind, but what you don't know about him is his insane career as an elite athlete, from football to wrestling to gymnastics to diving. He went on to be a world-renowned bodybuilder. He's a Hall of Famer. He has beat everybody he has ever competed against, except for two people. You're gonna find out who those two people are in the interview. You're not gonna wanna miss it. So, this is Shawn Ray, and this is how Shawn Ray is making his mark. Sugar Shawn Ray.
I'm here.
You are a household name.
I've been around for a while.
You know this.
Yeah.
Before we get started, because I want to dive into what has created you in the current moment, okay, and the future moments. But first, I need to know, how did you get your name, Sugar Shawn Ray?
I mean, we got to go back to like 1984.
Okay.
I just won, I believe it was the Miss Teenage California in 1984 at Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. Lonnie Teeper wrote for Iron Man magazine.
I remember.
And in one of the stories, he just kind of stuck that moniker on there, and it stayed with me throughout my bodybuilding career. It seems like if your name starts with an S, Sugar's going to come right after it. Sugar Ray Leonard, Sugar Shane Mosley, Sugar Shane Rashad. All these sugars started popping up.
Yeah.
But that one kind of stuck with me throughout my career.
You know what's interesting about that is that, in the industry, you're not really known for providing the sugar, are you?
I provide the sting. So there's also Stingray. That's the other side.
There's a little bit of a, of a kind of a,
it's
oxymoron.
Bittersweet.
It's an oxymoron with you, but we're going to get into all of that. I want to backtrack, okay, all the way back to the young Sugar Shawn Ray, okay? Yeah. Let's start from, your childhood. Yeah. Tell me about that.
The youngest of 8, a blended family. My dad had 3 kids, my mom who had 2, and then between them they had 3, of which I was the last. 1965. So I was born right into the middle of the civil rights movement, right when Malcolm X, I believe, got killed in 65, right after Martin Luther King in 63, and I think it was JFK was 63. A lot of stuff was going on in the 60s. I think Martin Luther King got killed in 68. We had the Vietnam War going on, so the Watts riots were happening. My uncle was arrested in the Watts riots. But anyhow, I was born and raised in pretty much lily white Orange County. And I say that because my parents had to fight for the right to get their house. They had the money, but people in the neighborhood in this particular tract did not want a Black African-American family moving into this new development. And I have the newspaper clipping. So it gave me some sense of kind of like what my parents had to go through. They had the money, but they had to fight the city. They had to sue the city. They won, and I was born and raised in that house until I moved out to become a professional bodybuilder at the ripe old age of 21. It wasn't something that affected me. It was something that I had to be acutely aware of, because there was probably about 5 Black families in the neighborhood, all the way through high school. And I didn't feel I was treated any different. I came from a sports family. We're all athletes, and we excelled. I had a brother that played football, baseball, track and field. My other brother also was a football player. We were standout athletes. And I think
was an arena you felt very accepted.
I think, because I think sport supersedes color a lot of times when you're good. And so it knocks down a lot of barriers. But my sister, being the only girl at the house, she had problems with getting dates for dances. There were times where we couldn't go in people's houses, and we didn't understand what the reasons were. Of course, as we got older, we understood that this was not a warm and fuzzy feeling in the neighborhood because of the history of the purchase of my dad's house. But over time, I think athletic achievement sometimes knocks those borders down. I was always a very good athlete, so I didn't really grow up feeling like I'm different. As a matter of fact, the only time I felt different was the accolades that I was receiving through boxing, through swimming, through wrestling, through football. And if I had it to do all over again, there was nowhere else I would have rather grown up except for on that street right there in Placentia, and the schools I went to, and the friends I grew up with. I would do it all over again. Yeah.
So you did boxing and football,
diving, wrestling, karate.
What was your favorite?
Football.
Football was your favorite sport.
I went to football like a duck takes to water. I wanted to play in the NFL since I started playing football back in 1975. And of course, by the time I became a senior in high school, I wanted to be a bodybuilder. But my first love was always football. Did
you have any challenges that you had to overcome in football, or were you?
Well, just the injury I sustained my senior year in 1983. I was running my way into the history books at El Dorado, and right at one of our playoff games, right prior to it, I got my knee sprained. No tears, no ligament damage, but it was enough to sideline me for that championship game that we lost.
What position did you play?
I was a running back. I was the punter. I was a defensive halfback. I was the kick returner. I never left the field. So, I mean, I was doing it all.
Your speed, your power, you're like the guy.
Yeah, I ran
that they want to
way.
give the ball to.
Yeah, I still have rushing records and the longest run from scrimmage, and ultimately went into the High School Hall of Fame, and my football jersey was retired.
Wow.
So no one's ever worn my jersey since 1983.
Wow.
And here we are going up on my 40-year reunion this summer. So I did what I needed to do in football, and the reality of it was I was hurt. I went into a gym.
Really fast, can you remember a time, like a highlight of your football career in high school? Tell me.
When I ran for 98 yards. I mean, my whole thing.
You ran 98 yards.
When I was there as a freshman, I knew what the rushing record was. It was 96 yards. And as a freshman going into El Dorado, I wanted that record. And as fate would have it, one of our linebackers intercepted the ball on the 2-yard line.
Okay.
My football coach literally said, "Call your play." Yeah. And I called a power left. I came off the left tackle. I hit the defensive end, and it was Green Acres all the way. You couldn't have been more scripted. Yeah. And it happened literally 2 games before I wound up injuring my knee, and that was going to be the end of my career. But it opened up another door. I wasn't wallowing in self-pity. I did everything I could do as a running back. I set the records, got my jersey retired, went into the Football Hall of Fame. But along the way, I learned something about myself, that I was playing in a system.
Okay.
Where we had a good quarterback, not a great quarterback. Our coach wanted to throw the ball. I wanted to run the ball. 100 yards wasn't enough. 98 yards wasn't enough. I wanted more. I was way more ambitious than the guys I was playing with. I wanted to go to the NFL. And playing within the confines of a team, I would leave the field still feeling energetic, still feeling like I wanted to go out there and do more. And
it's not an individual sport, and
it was perceived as being greedy, right? And selfish. And turning into bodybuilding, that's all it is about. It's all about me. I controlled my fate.
You were just like, yes.
I controlled my destiny. I controlled the weights. I controlled the food, the size, the pump, the competitions I was choosing. I just loved the individuality of being able to sculpt. And I've always called myself a physique artist. So this is something that I control, something I could do. No one could hold me back from what I'm trying to build. Yeah. And that's why I fell in love with bodybuilding.
How old were you when you started?
I was 17 when I started.
17? Okay. Yeah. So aside from the injury in football, was there another obstacle or another setback or an experience that you had of failure?
That was the only time I felt like it was beyond my control.
Because you were you had experienced nothing but success. So you hadn't really proven to yourself yet that you were the kind of person who would overcome adversity.
I did. I mean, mind you, my senior year, I'd already competed. I competed at the Newport Harbor High School at the Gold Cup, the West Coast competition. I got second, and then I went and I won the Teenage Los Angeles. Yes. So going into my senior year, that's when I had this mentality that I'm bigger, faster, and stronger than these guys because I'm a bodybuilder playing a running back. And throughout the season, I was training like a bodybuilder running the football. So I had this superiority complex about these guys aren't going to stop me. I squat 3 plates, you know,
Right.
they can't stop me. I bench 300. And so I was in there trying to bully some guys until I got stopped in my tracks. And then once I had to rehab my leg and come back to bodybuilding, and I did it successfully, then I realized that that's really, if I put more energy and more time into this physique, let's see where it could go. The same way I thought about football. The one thing I couldn't do in football, I couldn't get any taller.
Yeah.
I didn't feel I could get any faster, but I knew as a bodybuilder, I could get bigger and stronger, and I controlled that. And I went on to win the Teen California Teenage Nationals, Junior World Championships in Mr. California, and turned pro 3 years out of high school.
Well, you were limited by some things in football. Number one, you were limited by the fact that you were in a team environment.
Yes, that was the biggest setback.
Yes. And then also, your size and your height and everything. I'm vertically challenged, so I can say this. But, then you are also not able to show yourself, like, when I fail, I can succeed, because you're super talented. You are, on this like upward trajectory. But the first time that you experienced a loss, when you got second place in the bodybuilding contest, that was the first time that you were able to prove to yourself, I'm the kind of person who does not give up. Like, I'm not going to get second place. That
was humbling, because, my mentor that got me started in bodybuilding was saying that I'd be a future Mr. Olympia before I stepped on a bodybuilding stage. And
so you were filled with all these,
that positive reinforcement of what I could do, what I was capable of. And then, getting second place in a show that all my friends were saying I would win, it was humbling on one end, and it was very scary, because going into that show, they were all bigger than me. I was a smaller, shorter bodybuilder, but I was more proportionate than the bigger guys. And the following week, I beat the guy that beat me. And that gave me the validation and belief in my mind that, all right, maybe it's not about size. Maybe it is about more complete and development and presentation. And I took the constructive criticisms of what I needed to do to get better. And I could go back in the gym and do those things. When I played football, my coaches weren't really coaching me. They were guiding me. I was playing on a different level than some of my teammates were. They were playing for Friday night and the after party and for fun. And I had the mentality, I'm going to the NFL.
You needed an individual sport.
I did.
It sounds like being tied down by all those limitations.
And I needed somebody to tell me that I have to do more. I have to eat more. I have to train more. I have to work harder. And John Brown was that guy for me. He was the guy saying, look, man, it's all there if you do X, Y, and Z. And
so John Brown, tell me about John Brown. How did
you find him? He was the roommate of the guy that I first started working out with when I joined a gym. I left high school. I joined the gym in the off season, ran into a bodybuilder who kind of saw some potential in me. And he's a grown man, probably 10 years older than me. And I'm changing his weights. And he kept telling me about his roommate and was showing me the pictures of John on the wall and showing me the magazines. And John was coming back from Europe. And when John came walking in the door, I mean, what I saw in the magazines was puny compared to the man that walked in the door. It was like a behemoth. And I thought, oh, well, maybe bodybuilding is not something I can do. But he saw right away that if I started doing what he was doing, that he could help shape and mold me. And all I had to do was kind of follow him. And the first thing he said is, you got to up the calories. You got to eat more. You got to take naps. You got to train twice a day. You got to, no weekends off. And it was just like this dictatorship of telling me what I needed to do. And I was watching his lifestyle. He came in with a bag of money from Europe. He's on all the magazines. He's got a trophy wall full of trophy and hardware. Everywhere he went, he got this respect. He was wearing some really kind of crazy 80s style clothes, but it was something I wanted for myself, because what I saw, what it looked like, it didn't look like, outside of training, it didn't look like he had a job. Like, he was just signing autographs. He was performing. He was being celebrated. And it was all based on the sweat of his brow in the gym. And I thought, that's what I want. He's traveling the world. I'm dropping him off at the airport. He's coming back with money. Wherever we go, they're opening the doors for him. He was looked at like an NFL football player, a celebrity. And here I was, this teenager, kind of riding the coattails, going into nightclubs, being places I wasn't supposed to be, because I was like his little brother.
You're not supposed to be there. I
was a shadow. So he was able to open doors for me that I wouldn't have been able to open.
That's awesome.
And I thought, you know what, it doesn't rub off. And he reminded me that. Being who he was, you have to do the work. You have to put in the time. It's not going to rub off. I can show you. You have to do the work. And I gravitated towards that authoritarianism, dictatorship of, you want this, then here's what you have to do. And if you don't do it, I'm going to check up on you and you're going to do it again.
Yeah.
Being a son of a janitor, we'd go into buildings and clean the room. And on the surface, it would look clean. Then my dad would come in behind us and pull the couch out, and there's all the dirt. Pull out the in the bathrooms, get behind all this stuff, and you'd see this mound of dirt that it wasn't clean. We just kind of went over it. And my dad would make us detail stuff. And John Brown was the guy that was the detailer.
So you felt like there was a connection between him and your dad. You felt like this father figure almost with him.
Yeah, it kind of they were coinciding in different ways.
That's awesome.
What John was doing was harder than what my dad did. What John was doing, I kind of had a passion for.
Right.
What my dad was doing, I had a disdain for because of the hours.
Yeah.
Being a janitor, you're cleaning buildings from between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m.
But it taught you discipline.
Oh, 100%. But I mean, he was the boogeyman. I'm in bed and I hear him coming up the stairs at 11. I know I'm going to work, you know? And so it got to a point where I was just, I despised that because it wasn't fun.
Yeah.
I didn't get self-gratification from it. What I was doing with John, I was feeling the pain. I was feeling the aches. I was feeling the short gains and the little victories I was having in the gym. I could see the results changing on my body. And that's what I fell in love with because I was in control of it. This wasn't something that my dad was making me do. This was something I wanted to get out of bed and do on top of cleaning the toilets.
Right. On top of, so aside from him believing in you, what else like caused that intrinsic belief in yourself? Like, how did you feel? Because I mean, in bodybuilding, this is like the era where Dorian Yates is coming out. You have the guys that are just humongous. Yeah. And then you're, aesthetically very elite, but what gave you that intrinsic feeling of
you got to remember when I came out in '83, the time, right? There's no social media,
right?
So it's only magazines,
right?
Some VHS tapes, but the time was Arnold had retired in 1980. Right. I didn't know who he was. I came on the scene in '83, but looking back, you see Arnold, and then you see his training partner Franco, and Franco's 5'5" on a good day,
right?
1981 Mr. Olympia, 1982 Mr. Olympia is Chris Dickerson at 5'5", maybe 5'6". 1983, when I started, the Lion of Lebanon, Samir Banu, 5'6". I'm right there. I'm 5'7".
Yeah, you're like in the classic.
And I'm doing my history. I'm looking, and John's telling me, look, these are guys. Right. The last 3 Mr. Olympia winners is your size. Right. There's no 6-foot guy. Arnold's retired, and so I'm studying guys that were doing something that I thought I could mold and shape myself into because I was their height, I was their weight. But they were still a million miles away because these are grown men. I mean, Chris Dickerson won the Mr. Olympia, I believe, at 42 years old. I was 17 when I started. When in 1983, Samir Banu winning the Mr. Olympia, that was the peak of his career. Mine was starting. Yeah. So you can imagine 5 years later, in 1988, what it felt like for me to stand on the Olympia stage next to Samir Banu. Yeah. Mr. Olympia. So my genetics, my potential that John had told me about, I was living up to that because of what I was being fed, the positive reinforcement that these guys, you can get there, you can do it. So I had very good feedback. I had very rapid ascent through the teenage and the juniors. And
really fast, did you ever talk to Arnold, Franco, Samir? So
I met Chris Dickerson, our 1982 Mr. Olympia, in 1983. Nice. He's the first Olympia winner that I had met. Okay. Ironically, as fate would have it, I got a photo shoot set up with John Balick from Iron Man magazine because of Chris Dickerson. Okay. So I had, at the 83 Mr. Los Angeles, I got second place in the open division to Bob Paris's boyfriend, Matt Bettetti. And I found that very ironic because at the time in 1983, Bob Paris was the rage. He was the national champion. He was Mr. Universe. He's on Muscle and Fitness. He's being photographed with Rachel McClish. Bob Paris was every guy's dream and every girl's dream. He's everything we all wanted to be. And I'm getting beat by his boyfriend in the Mr. Los Angeles. I'm thinking, how crazy is this that I'm in the open division because there's no teenage. Yeah. And I'm getting beat by my idol's boyfriend. Yeah. Fast forward, the following year, they had a teenage division for the Mr. Los Angeles. I would go on to win the teenage division. And I got a letter from Chris Dickerson. Okay. Said, hey, I was at the show. I saw you. You remind me of myself. Let me know if you're ever at Gold's Gym Venice. No. By the gods, Mr. Olympia, 1982. And it was a typed letter, but he signed it.
So did you meet him?
So I wrote him back. Okay. I said I was going to be in Venice Beach. I'd already gone there once with John Brown. Okay. But now I'm going by myself. driving down to Gold's Gym, Venice Beach to meet Chris Dickerson. And I walk in, oh, by the gods, he's got this baritone voice. We're eyeball to eyeball.
Yeah.
And, I'm studying him in the magazines. I'm watching the Mr. Olympia video. And there were a lot of similarities that he saw in me from himself. And I thought, if this guy can
So
be
he's
Mr.
not trying to
Olympia,
sabotage you or keep enemies close.
he
really saw something in you.
He saw an artist.
Nice.
And he's an opera-trained singer. He's a triplet.
Okay.
And he's Mr. Olympia, very refined, very cultured, and very fatherly. His voice is a certain elegance to the sound and the ring of his voice, but he was telling me the pitfalls of bodybuilding, what I needed to stay away from and what I would need to do and all of these things. So I always referred back to him throughout my career.
Right.
He passed away 2 years ago at, I think it was 82 years old. But he stayed in contact with me throughout my career. And again, as fate would have it, I would have an opportunity to compete with Chris in 1990 at the Drug Tested Arnold Classic. And we were warming up backstage. So you can imagine when we were warming up doing the towel pulls and I'm looking at him.
Oh man.
How far back I was going to when I was a teenager, getting that letter at my house and then meeting him and then doing calves. He had the world famous calves. I trained with him once. We did calves. He asked what body part. I said, let's do calves and we'll do back. So we did, did some dumbbell rows at Gold's and we did calves. And he was selling posing trunks. So his trunks, they weren't my style. I was working with another company called Nitwit, but his trunks were a different cut. And he mentored me throughout my career. But it was a spark that lit a flame in me after meeting him in person and saying, this is possible. It's not a million miles away. He's not superhuman. He's not 600 pounds and 7 feet tall, puts his pants on one leg at a time. And it was that chance encounter with him that I thought, okay, I can do this.
You know what is so cool is that you had people that really saw something in you, and that must have felt so good. I mean, talk about a feedback loop.
Yeah, validation.
You're getting that validation. You have people that are scouting you out like you are an artist.
You got to remember, I don't know what genetics is. They kept throwing this genetics thing. Or you got great genetics. You got great potential. Potential and genetics will only get you so far in this industry.
Right.
You have to figure out the diet, the training.
So you didn't let this get to your head?
No, I wanted more. The more I heard it, the more I believed in it. And if you don't buy into the belief of the positive reinforcement, you're not going to go to the places that they think you can go. I believed it. And I say this again, the correlation with me and Mike Tyson is I always have to give him respect because we're the same age. We came up at the same time.
Right.
And what he was doing from 15 to 20 was what I was visualizing myself doing from 17 to 21. He's knocking these guys out. They're much bigger. They're all taller. But his training and his work ethic, he would get up and run at 3:30 in the morning just because he knew everybody else would be sleeping. I would train early in the morning before school, go to school, practice football after school, play in the game on the weekend.
You were doing hard things because you knew it was training you mentally, not 100%. Necessarily because it was going to change your body, but the mental training of it was the
and it was all
force.
Solo. I mean,
I'm like that too.
A lot of those things I was too. I didn't have another buddy that was a bodybuilder. My mentor was a bodybuilder, a grown man who's traveling the world, who had a little bit of time for me. He disappeared a year and a half into my journey. So I have to figure this stuff out on my own. And where I'm from in Placentia, there's no bodybuilders. I didn't have buddies that wanted to go to Gold. Hey, you want to go to Gold's Gym this weekend? They're like, what's that?
Yeah.
These were football players.
Yeah.
The ones that were lifting weights were doing it for recreation. I had visions in my head. I wanted to get paid to do this one day.
Yeah.
And through the grace of God,
and you
no injuries, and the belief in myself, I did it. I knew where every gym was in Orange County. I figured out where every gym was in LA. I went to almost every show every weekend by myself. It wasn't a group sport. But when you love something, you're not looking for people to come along with you.
Right. Now, as you continue on your journey, you are very well known for your honesty, right? And you have very similar views. And the reason I ask you about, meeting with Arnold is because you and Arnold had very similar views of bodybuilding. He really believed in maintaining that classic look. Yeah. As guys were starting to get bigger and, heavier, it was like you were kind of like that that gatekeeper of that classic physique. And a lot of people felt this way about you.
Yeah.
And I know you were open about your thoughts on this. So tell me a little bit more about that, how you maybe felt like you were aligned with Arnold, and then if you ever had a chance to sit down and have a conversation.
Oh, 100%. Listen, change comes hard and fast sometimes. And when I came up, again, I told you in 4-year period, I'm standing there with Samir Banu, but I was also standing there with Lee Haney, who was the next big thing at 5'11" after Arnold retired in 1980. And Lee Haney would go on to win for 8 consecutive years from 84 to 91.
He was tall, but he was still so classic and elegant.
He was, with the tiny little waist.
Right.
And he set the benchmark. I mean, nobody complained of any of his victories. I think maybe 1990 he wasn't at his best physically, but he was still superior genetically.
Right.
So his wins were undisputed. And then he was gone. And then the next guy came, Dorian Yates, in 1991. And it seemed like all of those classic physiques were now being left as something of the past. You know, Frank Zane and Lee Labrada and myself. And they were just going for the bigger guys, because now here comes Nasser El-Sambadi, Jean-Pierre Fuchs, Paul Dillette. I mean, it was the 90s was the age of how big can we get? And when you stand a classic physique, symmetrical, proportionate, and detailed next to one of these behemoths, you're constantly going to be drawn to the size difference.
Right, of course.
And again, this comes back to almost like boxing. You can't take a lightweight and put him in there with a heavyweight and think it's going to be a fair fight.
Right.
But at the end of the day, my belief was it's a sum total of the parts, which means you take in all the criteria.
Yeah.
Coming into bodybuilding, I was of the belief that the best guy will win, the guy with the fewest flaws. And somewhere in the 90s, that got lost because we had bodybuilders winning with torn body parts. We had bodybuilders coming in with bloated stomachs. We had bodybuilders coming in great from the front, not so great from the rear. And
you were open about saying this.
I had no problem saying it.
We didn't have social media yet, but you were
in the magazines. And
you were also on, TV.
Yes,
You're on ESPN.
I was a host.
Did you get backlash?
Well, the only backlash I would get were from the people I was criticizing. I was criticizing the infrastructure of the judging system. I felt every single year, if you have the same judges, you have the same results.
Yeah.
And to give you historical context, being 22 years removed from the Olympia stage, during my run, I was 13 years in the Olympia.
Yeah.
But in 22-year time period, we had 3 winners. And it was all consecutive winners.
Yeah.
You had Lee Haney for 8 years, Dorian Yates for 6 years, Ronnie Coleman for another 8 years. So while they were dominant bodybuilders, they were speculative. I think you could, depending on who you ask, you could have had Flex Wheeler, you could have had myself, you had Kevin Levrone, you had Vince Taylor. There's arguably some other Hall of Fame bodybuilders.
Agreed.
That could have walked off with that title.
I agree.
But it was never going to happen so long as you had the same judges showing up every year.
Yeah.
And during my era, we had a vice president of the IFBB who got kicked out, Wayne DeMilia. It was a dictatorship. And he chose the judges, and they were his crew, and they were the same guys that were picking the winners. So when you have that type of a system, and you have the vocal, I guess the non-filter that I have.
People can look at it 2 ways. I mean, on one hand, people can say, oh, Shawn Ray is sour grapes. He's not winning. He's going to say.
But there's a lot of guys that didn't win.
But the other side of it is what I believe. I'm of the opinion that I actually have a lot of respect for the fact that you stick to your guns, and not many people do this. They will say what they want to say. But then I don't really give someone credit for that if they backtrack after the backlash happens, right?
No, right.
The thing about, you know what I'm saying?
Well.
And that's with you will say something, and then regardless of what comes your way, you stick to it.
That's the way it's supposed to be. And at the end of the day, I mean, I don't try to be politically correct, but I got things that back up what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So if you go back and you look at the old guard, you see we have international contests around the world, and only the Olympia has a select group of people as if they're the only ones qualified to judge. It's a physique show.
Yeah.
They can judge all these shows, but when it comes to Olympia, no one else can break into this. And that's how you keep control.
But were you frustrated?
I wasn't frustrated because I was so busy. I was at some time, I think I was sponsored by like 9 or 10 different companies at one point in my career. My boss was Joe Weider. I didn't answer to the federation.
So you still felt like you were winning?
I was winning because I was living the life I wanted to live. I recognized the system that I was in. And if you can recognize the problem, you can deal with it. I wasn't leaving the Mr. Olympia pissed off. My check was coming from Joe Weider. I'm all over the world. I'm on all the magazines.
That's what I mean. That's what people should be
living the lifestyle.
trying to strive for.
Yeah. I mean, look, I wasn't injured. So I was deprived of something I felt entitled to. But I also knew that there were times where I thought Flex Wheeler was going to be Mr. Olympia. There were times that Kevin, I felt these guys were getting screwed, not just me. So if you could understand why it's happening, then it's easier to sleep at night. But as quickly as that show was over, I was on the airplane going to another country. I'm signing autographs. I'm endorsing products. I'm living that life as a teenager that I thought was the glamorous life. So how could I be frustrated, angry, mad, disappointed over one contest? I only competed pretty much once a year. The Olympia was my thing. And understanding the dynamic of what was happening when I went in the show allowed me to then comprehend that I'm going to a show that I'm probably not going to win.
Oh, you qualified.
Every year I qualified by being in the top five.
Yeah.
So it's an automatic requalification back then. And I didn't have any sour grapes because look, I'm getting paid to be there.
Yeah.
And then I'm getting paid afterwards on the tours that I was arranging for myself.
Okay, maybe
the
not.
Business sense was working.
Maybe not sour grapes, but tell me about one time that you truly felt like you should have won.
Oh, wow. It's easy. It's 1994.
Tell
but again,
me about
1996 too. But of course, Dorian will tell you because he's Mr. Olympia, it takes a bigger guy to beat a bigger guy, right? So in his mind, the victory is solid and secure. In my mind, I'm going, well, wait a minute. Let's break it down. This is the year Dorian tore his bicep a month out from the show.
94?
94, and you can clearly see it. His weight is a lot worse than it was in 93. No argument. It was an honor to stand there and lose to Dorian in 93. Really impressive. But in 94, I could see that the guy was a beaten man. And I can't blame the individual. I know it's the system that's giving him the title.
Yeah.
So I didn't harbor any. He took offense to me critiquing his physique. We weren't friends. But you can't hide the belly. The water retention and the color that was dripping off of his body. I'm this close. I can see it looked like mud. That's not a good look for the winner.
Right.
And then, he's hiding the bicep because he's got it posed from one side.
Yeah.
And, the victory goes to him. And it's a big difference. I think it was like $50,000 difference in the immortality of that title. So it left me wanting. Yeah. But if that was going to finish me, I would have never had another bite at the apple in 96 where I thought I could have taken him out too. So now I know it's a subjective sport.
Yeah.
I was closer to him in 94, 96.
Really fast.
Leave that to the fans.
You know what's interesting is like back then, because there was no social media, it would be interesting for that same exact event to happen now that we have social media, because you have your fans coming for him. He has his fans coming for you. People really, really back you up. People really, really back him up. It would be interesting to see in the court of public opinion in this day and age, what would
the problem is that you have, once the genie's out of the bottle, it's hard to put it back in.
Yeah.
We've had years of the mass monsters having pretty good success because they're bigger. Listen, I created the 202-pound division because the mass monsters were not allowing the smaller guys a platform.
Right.
In 2005, 2007, I think it was. No, 2005. Had I not promoted the 202 division, we would have never had the 212 division.
Right.
So I'm in retirement. I'm trying to find something to do to enjoy my passion. And I contact Steve Weinberger, who puts on the New York Pro Show. And said, let us sponsor the new division. We'll come up with the prize money and let's have this. You have to be under 202 pounds. They decided to take it. David Henry won the very first one and gave him $5,000. I think we went 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And from that, Kevin English would come on to win 3 202 Olympias. So then they elevated it. Yeah, I started that.
Yeah, so that's awesome. And this comes from your passion for wanting to maintain that classic version.
We needed to get back to the beauty. And I just thought we were losing it because the big guys are just going to make the smaller guys extinct.
Yeah.
If they know they can't win, there's no reason to go.
It's true.
So I put my money where my mouth is, and the two divisions were separated. And from that, they went up to 212 pounds. And of course, James Flex Lewis won, I think, 6 or 7 of those. And we heard, other names like Guy Cisternino and Jose Raymond. These are names you would never even hear from. Now we got Sean Clarita, Derek Lunsford, Keon Pearson. If that 202 division didn't exist back then, those guys probably wouldn't be able to bodybuild.
Now, I agree. 1995, you have your Shawn Ray Colorado Classic.
Yeah, 2005.
2005. I'm sorry, 2005. So in 2005, you have your Colorado Classic.
Yes.
However, I remember there was something in 1995 where you interviewed Dexter.
Yeah, I was still competing back then.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the Shawn Ray Classic came years later.
That came years later. Okay, but in 1995, you had an interview with Dexter. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I was working for ESPN. I was commentating all the bodybuilding shows, the USAs and the Nationals, sometimes with Joe Fowler, sometimes with Joe Amato. I was the NFL guy on the field.
Yeah.
And we saw Dexter coming, man. He won the light heavyweight division, I believe it was. And I interviewed him. He's coming off the stage. He could barely breathe. He could barely catch his breath. We're eyeball to eyeball. We're the same height. And I said, so what is it that you would like to do? And he says, I'd like to one day, compete as a pro and compete against you one day. I thought, he's got a long way to go, kid. I think I did like my 6th or 7th Olympia back then. And lo and behold, he would not only go on to become the sport's winningest professional bodybuilder.
Yes.
But he would win 9 Arnold Classic titles.
Yep.
He'd become the 2008 Mr. Olympia champion. And he would compete beyond the age of 50.
Yep.
And so you just don't know where the next talent is going to come from. And I didn't know it when I was standing in front of him because I was interviewing bodybuilders all around the country.
Yeah. An 18-year run, I believe.
He had a 21-year run, as a matter of fact, as a pro.
You know the stats.
Yeah, I did the Mr. Olympia 13 times, and I believe he did it 20.
Oh, my goodness.
And so he was the least likely candidate to become this Ironman type bodybuilder because we had Dorian and Ronnie and Lee Haney and of course Flex Wheeler and Kevin Levrone, and Dorian or Dexter was that guy that just wouldn't go away, and he was able to peak and compete. He changed trainers. He went from Charles Glass to George Farah, and he got a second run by meeting George Farah, and he's always worked with someone.
Right.
I was introduced to bodybuilding, but I always worked by myself.
Yeah.
And so he arguably goes down as one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time that at the time I didn't appreciate because he never beat me. He caught me at the last 3 Olympias of my career. I believe I'm like 5 years older than Dexter.
Okay.
And I didn't have the same appreciation for him while he was competing because I thought, he's that guy that could hang on longer than the rest. He outlasted me. He outlasted Chris. He outlasted Flex and Kevin. And so he's beating guys that were a lesser caliber. As the further away we were getting from retirement, we thought the quality of the athletes were diminishing. But the one thing that wasn't happening with Dexter was he wasn't diminishing.
Right.
He was maintaining and sometimes getting even better.
So he earned your respect.
He earned my respect. And sometimes that respect doesn't come while you're in the moment. It comes from a further lens. You got to get back and move away. Well, I mean, listen, what drives a bodybuilder sometimes, you have to have a little bit of animosity. I was the guy he wanted to beat.
The feeling that you have to earn respect is sometimes what drives people.
Yeah, 100%. Like, listen, me and Dorian weren't friends. We're cool now.
Yeah.
But I despised him. He represented a whole nother country. He was the total opposite of me.
That probably pushed you to.
Oh, sure. He didn't like me either.
You helped him get better.
I always said in retirement that if there's no Dorian Yates, there's probably no Shawn Ray. I needed that. I needed that obstacle in my career because you got to remember, I was supposed to be the chosen one after Lee Haney. Lee Haney retired in 1991. If there's no Lee Haney, I'm right there. 91 is when I won the Arnold Classic. I'm right there for the taking of that title to be the next big thing. And I'd be battling out with Flex and Kevin Levrone and maybe Vince Taylor.
Well, let's really fast. I have a question for you. Okay, so 95, you're doing commentary on ESPN. You're doing interviews. I know you have very entrepreneurial spirit. You're doing a lot of stuff.
Muscle camps. Yeah.
You do muscle camps. You were hiring some of your colleagues to do the muscle camps with you. I know you have a lot going on. Okay.
Yep.
Now, my question to you is: you had people who saw something in you. Were you at that point having your feelers out for up and coming talent, or were you still in like the I'm competing mode? You have to earn my respect mode?
Yeah, it was all about me in the 90s.
At least you're honest.
Yeah, well, I didn't have any reason to try to share the wealth or seek new talent. But on my way out,
I love the honesty, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, this is a very selfish sport.
It is.
And most guys come in to take. And that's the one thing John Brown appreciates from me, is that I wasn't there to take things from him except for wisdom and knowledge. I changed his weights. I went and got his groceries at the grocery store. I picked him up when he was taking off and arriving from the airport. I was his biggest fan.
Right.
Because I wanted to be him one day.
Right.
And even to this day, he can't come and eat with me without me paying for his food. Right. I'm 20 years in retirement, and I still buy his food when he comes out to eat with me.
Right.
He just can't he can't pay for me to eat. I buy his meals out of respect. But in retirement,
you're indebted to him.
Yeah, I mean, I pay it forward that way. But in retirement, there were a few guys I helped. On my way out, I was helping Melvin Anthony. On my way out, I helped Richard Jones. On my way out, I was still helping Flex Wheeler try to make his comeback in 2004. But when I was done,
which was
2001, I was done. But by 2005, when I decided I wanted to be a promoter, I wanted to be able to do something bigger than just look in the mirror at myself. And production was the thing. I knew what was happening behind the scenes. I knew about the sponsors, the building, the trophies, the judges, the tanning. So I figured, let me just do my own thing. I'm over here complaining about the prize money they're not giving these guys. Let me raise my own prize money. So my first pro show I raised, after they did the 212 or 202, I raised $70,000 for the first Shawn Ray Pro-Am. I had pro bodybuilding and pro figure. And I had an amateur show, and I held my show in the convention center in downtown Denver, Colorado, where most shows are being held in high schools.
Now, was there a moment where you went from, where you like distinctly remember you went from being super selfish to kind of letting that go and starting to think about like giving back? Was there a moment of...
I didn't think I needed to give anything back. I felt like, bodybuilding is my passion. I have all this education. I have all this experience around the world dealing with promoters and judges and sponsors and athletes. It didn't look like it was beyond my reach to just do my own thing and still be able to enjoy it. It's like playing football. When you stop playing football, you're not going to get anywhere near the field unless you become a coach or unless you become a commentator. And so...
You still have a passion for the sport and you're involved in it. You're like in the trenches.
It was still in my blood. And so... I had my daughter in 2005, and that's a whole nother thing, because then you're just sitting there with this baby and just feeding, and you're waiting for it to grow and walk and all that. You blink and that time's gone.
There's no instruction manual.
Yeah, now they're kind of, they're walking, they're doing their own thing. I didn't want to be that guy sitting on the couch and just letting it all go. So I decided to start promoting shows. And I took to promoting shows the way that an athlete who experienced promoters that didn't appreciate us. So I wanted to make sure that the athletes got everything they needed and put us in venues that were nice. I mean, in my first production, we gave out $70,000 in prize money and a Hummer, right? And we held it in a convention center, the Hummer 3, H3. And
why wasn't I competing?
We gave the Hummer to a fan.
No
to
way.
Get the fans to come and support the show. We were able to give away a Hummer to one of the lucky fans that came. And that wasn't happening at the time. Arnold Schwarzenegger had been giving away Hummers at the 2002, 3, and 4 Arnold Classic. And then Ronnie Coleman received one once at the Mr. Olympia. That's where I got the idea from. But I was dealing in an industry where in 1990, I won $10,000 for winning the Ironman. In 2005, the Ironman was still giving away the same $10,000 first place prize money.
Didn't account for inflation.
Yeah. And so my first time at it, I went, here's $70,000. Here's the convention center. Let's do this. And it was a huge accomplishment for me that made me want to continue doing it.
What was the feedback on that?
It was phenomenal. I mean, that's where we don't know who Phil Heath is unless he's winning my show. He won that contest. And then there's Kai Green. He wins it the following year. David Henry was a 202 Mr. Olympia champion. And those are all made possible because of what I was promoting.
You feel like you bred some of those champions.
My fingerprints are on it. And so they can't get away from the fact that I created those shows for them to win. Whenever they talk about their first pro win and that $25,000 check, it's coming back to me. And that feels good to know.
You take a lot of pride in that.
I do, because my first pro check was $10,000.
Yeah.
And the promoter said, hey, if you want to give away some money, then do your own thing. And without John Balick ever saying that to me, I might not have ever become a promoter.
Yeah.
So it did take a challenge for me to do it. Yeah. And now I'm doing my 8th Shawn Ray Classic in all the way over in Hawaii. Still promoting and still loving it.
Yeah. You're so passionate about bodybuilding. You have an obsessive personality, don't you?
Well, I'm a Virgo. I just like to do things right and do it right the first time.
Well, you were from your football career, you were, all in on that. That was your identity.
Yeah.
As soon as you found something new, and I'm saying I can relate to this too. It's like you found your next thing.
Sure.
And all in. And you have been all in since you first even started it.
Yeah.
Finding ways around, okay, if you're not competing, you're, promoting, you're doing sponsorships.
Sure.
You're doing like commentating, all that stuff. It's like you're entrenched in it because you're still so bodybuilding now is basically your identity.
Well, yeah. And the thing about it is, and I say this all the time, I heard it, if you find something you do that you love, you'll never work a day in your life, right? So it's a labor of love, but I don't look at it as work. It's an accumulation. I'm everything. I'm all of the people that I've met in this industry, from the photographers to the promoters to the tanning companies. I watch and study their job. Yeah. One thing I've never been able to do is photography.
That's the one thing you can't do, huh?
Yeah, and I'm not really interested in all that stuff. I like it better on this side of the camera, but I know the importance of a good quality photograph. So I always have the best photographers taking pictures of my athletes too.
But ironically, okay, as imbalanced as it seems like you are, because you are so obsessive, you have managed to live somewhat of a balanced life. Like you reached a point in your career where you were like, okay, now it's time to start a family.
Sure.
So we're going to backtrack a little bit. Tell me about that. You kind of being in your selfish mode, all about me, I'm competing. And then what triggered you to go, you know what, I want to start a family?
Well, I mean, listen, when you feel like you've gone as far as you can go, you got to walk away with some dignity. My last Mr. Olympia, I knew going into it in 2001, it was my last. You get to a point of frustration, training felt like it was work.
Now, how old were you?
I was 35, 36 years old.
Okay.
And I was feeling the political nature of how the Olympia machine's being run, right? Like, it's not something I'm going to be able to win in my lifetime.
Right.
So what am I doing? Do I want to do this again next year? I mean, this guy, Ronnie Coleman's going to win for the next 5 years. He would win the next 4.
Okay.
I wasn't bodybuilding to just watch the Ronnie Coleman victory party. And being a part of the first 4 was great, but I didn't want to be there for another 4.
Yeah.
And so I was already looking at things I wanted to do with my life. And, my friends' kids were growing up. My nieces and nephews were growing up. There had to be more. I had a house in the hills. I had a condo at the beach. I had a place out in Las Vegas. I had 3 cars, 2 motorcycles, and a dog. There's got to be more to life. And so my mind was already moving fast forward that what's that going to look like with a family? And so I decided to find the right girl. Obviously, someone that I was going to fall in love with was going to be someone that probably had some common interests. So it would happen in the gym. Yeah. And my wife was not a bodybuilder. She was doing fitness routines and trained at my gym. And so then we started going out to eat and going to the movies. And I don't have to be anywhere at this time, right? I'm retired. I'm not having to work on my body. I was open to it. And then we had my middle daughter we had in 2005. And then my next daughter we had in 2008. And it wouldn't be until I think it was 2017 that I would find out that I had a daughter while I was in high school. So now I'm a girl dad of 3 girls. And I would inherit 3 grandchildren.
Okay, we brushed over that pretty fast. When you're 15.
I was 15. I had a daughter that I didn't know about.
Okay, so tell me about that. How did you not find out about that?
Well, we didn't have 23andMe and Ancestry.com. She found me on Ancestry.com.
Okay.
She found my first cousin, which is my uncle.
She wasn't like hiding it from you. She just didn't know that it was yours. Okay.
She knew she was adopted.
Got it.
And I guess when she decided to figure out who she was through technology, Ancestry.com, she put her information in the database. I wasn't out there looking for a kid I didn't know about.
Right. No, but when you were 15 and you had her, you weren't informed that
I didn't have her. Her mom got pregnant and her mom moved away.
Got it.
Had the baby.
And you never knew.
That was it. She was adopted at 6 days and had a family. And so I think it was in 2017 it was.
That's wild.
Or 2016, I received a phone call from my first cousin that she's talking to a girl that has a DNA match with her, and she thinks that I might be the dad or my brother might be her dad. I got my daughter's phone number, called her up, took the DNA test, 99.9. She told me who her mom was, and I remember the day, 1981, coming home from football practice, and it was a one-time thing, and that was it.
Wow.
And so...
How did that make you feel, honestly?
I was like, I embraced the entire process.
You embraced it?
At 99.9%,
You didn't have any like resentment at all?
No,
You
only thing I asked her was what took her so long, because at the time she found me, my daughter was 35, she's 42 now.
Okay.
She said she had parents. She didn't have any interest in looking for her biological mom and dad. And then when she finally decided to look, it was like within a couple of months, I think it was, or maybe a couple of weeks, that she found me, and we've been together ever since. She moved from Northern California to not too far from where I live. And if I called her right now, she could be at my mom's house. She could be with my sister. I mean, it was a really good integration process. Yeah. And the irony of that is 2 weeks later, my brother found out that he had a daughter on Ancestor.com in 1986 and 3 grandkids. So
you football players.
Boom. My mom said, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
So I was 15 and my brother was 20, and we had daughters that we never knew about. Wow. If you take Ancestor.com, I lose my daughter and I lose my grandkids.
Well, thanks to Ancestry.com.
So, they get a shout out on that one.
Shout out on that one. Yeah.
So I got 3 girls and 3 grandkids.
Wow.
But when I decided to start my family, for me it was a good transition, because it did take my mind off of just me. I wasn't worried about.
How do you think you would have handled that if you found out about it when you were 15?
Well, there's so many what ifs, right? Because that could have changed the trajectory of what my priorities were as a teenager.
It all worked out the way it was supposed to work out.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, that process, I'm just one of the stories. Yeah. I'm sure there's millions of different stories by now through technology that have changed the lives and the trajectory of children and grandchildren and all that. I'm grateful that it exists, because if it doesn't exist, I don't have my daughter. And we just got back from Aruba together. She comes to my show. She works my show as my cashier. And it's a really cool thing to have. Even though I missed those years, we're now making up for those. But with my 18-year-old and my 16-year-old, these were planned pregnancies that I wanted to have, that I knew about. And becoming a girl dad, it definitely was something that filled the void that, as a bodybuilder, you don't think about. As a bodybuilder, I'm a machine. Eat, sleep, and train. And it's just about me. I'm not thinking about college tuition. I'm not thinking about driver's license and all that other stuff. But with my daughters, being girls, it kept me from focusing on myself, because if I had a boy, he'd be playing football, he'd be bodybuilding, he'd be all the men stuff. But my daughters were gymnasts, to ice skating, dancing and singing. It's a whole nother thing. Yeah. And that took me and my mind away from just focusing on my body, which I think was beneficial. Tell
me about your parenting style. Were you the kind of parent who really pushed your kids, or did they intrinsically have their own?
Yeah, they're both very much self-starters, doing the things that they enjoy. I got my one daughter's an influencer, actor, dancer, singer.
This is Asia.
This is Asia, yeah. She's been in several movies, and she's had her own television show, and she's dropping new music June 28th.
You're a proud dad.
She's doing her own thing, graduated with a 4.6 in high school. My youngest daughter just got on the honor roll with a 3.75. So they're both very self-starters. I don't have to micromanage them. Neither one of them give me any trouble, no talk back, nothing like that. I think for me, my process of being a father has been very easy and smooth, and I think it has a lot to do with them being girls. If they were boys, I think if they're anything like me, it might have been a problem. So I'm grateful I got the girls to balance me out.
Well, I mean, I think you probably passed down some pretty good genetics. Interesting story, Asia, okay? She did a dance performance at Lonnie Teeper's show.
That's right, yeah.
And that's how she was discovered.
So, yeah, I filmed her.
Tell me about that.
I filmed her guest posing. And this is Lonnie. She's got to do her dance thing. She was one of the youngest national dance champions. I think she was 6 years old.
Yes.
And so when she went to perform, I videotaped it with my cell phone. That was the time that was happening. Yeah. Uploaded it onto YouTube, and I think it was Abby Lee Miller found it, and she was starting a new show called the Abby's Ultimate Dance Competition, and she wanted to meet my daughter. And the show, you had to be 9 years old. And so they bring her in.
And she was 6.
She was 6.
She was a little young.
We really can't do anything. But they bend the rules, and they put her in there. They let us know that she probably can't win, because it's a $100,000 scholarship to Joffrey School of Ballet. But she was on the show, and she made it to the top 3. Wow. And after that was over, she said, we want to do something with your daughter. So in the meantime, would you mind having her on Dance Moms? We were already watching Dance Moms because my daughter's a dancer.
Everyone watched Dance Moms.
So my daughter goes on Dance Moms for a season. And while that's happening, they're creating her own show, which was called Raising Asia. and it's a family show, kind of like showing us how we're raising her. But by the time they came back to Raising Asia, she was no longer dancing. She's singing. And so it was a little bit of an issue with the production because they wanted her just to kind of dance. And in dancing, you're just doing what you're told.
Right.
But she's a singer, and there's all kinds of different friction going on. And reality TV, you got to have some drama.
I saw.
And we're on this emotional roller coaster that we signed on for 14 weeks, and they're in your house from 8 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night. And that dynamic.
Did you ever have a fight with anyone?
I didn't have a problem because, look, I'm the dad that's getting paid to be on the show.
Yeah.
They're catering to me every day. Mr. Ray, what do you want to have for lunch? It's like Chipotle, P.F. Chang's, Wood Ranch. I'm happy because everyone is on the payroll.
Yeah.
And I'm watching my daughter do what she loves to do, which is sing.
Right.
She's got her little manager agent. She's got her momager over here. We got the mother-in-law's in and the sister. And it's a crazy dynamic to have lights, camera, action every single day. And of course, not everybody's cut out for that. Right. I grew up in it. That's what I came up in the media side. So you were able to
kind of mentor her a little bit. I'm sure that there are some things that she's overcoming. I mean, being in the spotlight is difficult.
Oh, yeah.
And
it's a pressure cooker. I mean, remember, it's called Raising Asia.
Yeah.
So it's all about her. But you know what? You're still a kid, right? Like there's things that you can't do, you can't say, and clothes you can't wear. And they really do a good job with reality TV to kind of like, I don't want to say, it percolates. And then it's exploited, and then you capture that moment on camera, and it's
she
all
handled
about.
That okay?
Oh yeah, she's good. She's a 4.6 GPA in school, and she's got her music dropping and modeling, and she's an influencer. She came out. It was only one season on that show.
Yeah.
And then she would move on to participate in O.J. Simpson versus the state of California. She played O.J. Simpson's daughter, Sydney, in the television show.
What?
Yeah, and then she did 2 motion picture appearances, and then she was doing a lot of hosting on the red carpets, and now she's doing an influencing stuff with her clothing and her makeup stuff. She's all over the map at 18 years old, and very, very independent. But reality TV is a shock to the system for people that have never been in front of the cameras. My daughter, being a 6-year-old national dance champion, an ice skater, and a singer, she was a natural for her.
Yeah. Wow. Proud dad.
Yeah. I mean, look, I didn't have to. I take responsibility for bringing her into the world and raising her, but the quality individual that she is, I mean, that's something that she just. I don't want to say she developed on her own, but you are a reflection of the company you keep. I really believe that.
I believe that too.
And with me, again, my upbringing, my mentor, John Brown, I told you about what he did with his 3 sons, right? Like they all 3 went to USC, Notre Dame, and Stanford. Took the SAT in I think 2 different languages. 2 of them are playing in the NFL. And the one that's from Stanford is working with his father on a supplement company and his dad's podcast. Great kids.
Right.
I mean, he did amazing with these 3 boys. And that was my mentor raising my kids.
Right.
And so I'd never had any problems with my kids. And John, by the way, raised his family in Anaheim, which is not far from where I grew up in Placentia. But when you're around people that have a good moral compass, that have upwardly mobile ambitions, and you live in an affluent neighborhood and you're around affluent people, you strive to be better than what they are. I mean, I got to where I'm at because I wanted to be the next John Brown.
This is a really good segue into the question that I want to ask you, which is, you obviously have had a huge influence on the past and current generations in bodybuilding and beyond, right? What advice would you give like an up and coming bodybuilder in the industry?
Sure. I mean, I've said that many times on my Instagram page, that, you got to take control of your career. This is something that you kind of have to see where it is you want to go and take the baby steps to try to get there. But again, I was making the pilgrimage to Gold's Gym in Venice at 17 in a car. It's a 45-minute drive for a teenager. It's daunting by myself. I don't even know who's there. But when I get there, it's everybody that was in Muscle Fitness and Flex magazine. There's Chris Dickerson, there's Mike Christian, there's, Hulk Hogan, there's the Barbarian Brothers. Somehow or another, it manifests itself that as a teenager looking, as a grown man, I became them. I'm not only in their fraternity, I have their phone numbers, we're eating food together, we're traveling the world together. I'm now the guy that other guys coming to Gold's Gym were looking at.
I believe in that. Manifesting
it's manifestation.
What you want.
Again, if you are the company you keep, I say that. I don't like to hang out with people that are not ambitious, upwardly mobile, secure, self-sufficient.
But you bring something to the table too, because some people will listen to that and they will try to, punch above what they're bringing to the table, right? Like somebody will maybe not be a motivated person reaching their goals, but then they feel, okay, listen to that advice. I'm entitled to go hang out with Shawn Ray, and I'm entitled to go hang out with, Chris Dickerson. And
again, I told you earlier, John Brown told me it doesn't rub off.
Right.
All right. This is something that it has to come from within.
You're bringing something to the table, and you feel like you deserve people that, are going to also be influencing you.
Well, I mean,
I believe in that too.
My friends in bodybuilding became the photographers. My friends were the writers.
Right.
My friends were the contest promoters. There's longevity in that. If I were an actor, I would be definitely paying attention to what's going on behind the camera, because maybe I'm only going to be camera friendly for so many years. Some of the best producers started out in front of the camera. I mean, I use Ron Howard as an example. He played Opie Taylor on one of those, I can't remember the show, but he went up through Happy Days and all that other stuff. But he then became a producer of movies, and because he knows what it's like in front of the camera, and then you develop what's supposed to be happening behind the camera. And then if you get into the production side, you have longevity, you have creativity, and then you have ownership.
Right.
And so as an athlete, I can only compete for so many years.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm still heavily involved and related is because I'm a producer.
Right.
It's Shawn Ray Productions. I have control over the things that I'm involved in. Sure, I'm an independent contractor and I work for this person, I work for this person, I do things for that person. But there are things that I choose to be involved in.
You're controlling it.
I'm controlling the machine. And I've always said this, the athletes have to take control of your career. It's not a free ride. I can help get you from here to there, but you're going to have to figure out how to get from there to there. And then life after bodybuilding. Again, my examples were people that I was looking at, like John Brown, who put all three of his kids through school on scholarship.
Yeah. Now, moving forward, we are talking right now about you making your mark, right? In and beyond this fitness industry. Looking back and moving forward, how do you feel you want to be remembered? And then what mark do you feel like you're going to leave behind?
Yeah. When you talk about being remembered, it's the footprint, right? Like I can't manufacture my past. You want to know about me? You got to Google it. I was there. I was in those 13 Olympias. I was in the top 5 for 12 years. That's a fact. I can't manufacture that. The 98-yard run still is a record today. 40 years later, I can't manufacture that. The jersey's retired.
Right.
Those are things I did. I beat Ronnie Coleman. I beat Kevin Levrone. I beat everybody I competed in bodybuilding except for 2. I never beat Lee Haney, who won the Mr. Olympia in 1984, all the way to 91. And I never beat Dorian Yates. So there was 2 bodybuilders in my 13 professional career that I never beat. So nobody can tell you that it can't be done. I beat everybody. That was all the big guys: Marcus Rule, Jean-Pierre Fuchs, Paul Dillette, Kevin Levrone, Flex Wheeler, all the greats in bodybuilding that came up that we talk about and reflect on in the 90s. I beat them all. You can't manufacture that. So I don't really have to worry about how I'm remembered. The stats are already there. Right. I mean, I didn't vote myself into the Bodybuilding Hall of Fame. They put me in the Bodybuilding Hall of Fame. I didn't ask to be in it.
What if somebody didn't know necessarily about your stats exactly? How would they see you?
Well, I'm one of the smaller bodybuilders. I'm considered one of the more classic physiques. That term didn't come until I retired. Classic. And that's nostalgic because the big guys were just, big behemoth. We started hearing words like Jurassic, gargantuan, and the shapelier bodybuilders were being talked about as a thing of the past.
You semi-pioneered the classic concept.
100%. And the most known bodybuilder competing is Chris Bumstead, right? He's the most popular if we're going to go based on social media numbers. And he's a classic physique guy. More people want to look like him than anybody else on the planet.
Yeah, that's true.
That tells you the direction of where we're headed. Like that's the look people want to go back to.
Right.
Sometimes what's in fashion today is out of fashion tomorrow, but it comes back around again. Right now, people are longing for more physiques.
And you feel like you had a part in that. You had a 100%. Huge part in that.
Which tells you there's something to be said for balance.
Right.
Bigger's not always better.
Right.
Balance, quality, for me, is better than quantity.
Right.
Especially when you're talking about a physique.
Moving forward, are you going to continue to take your controversial nature with you into the future?
I think the only reason why I'm still here is because I'm unapologetic for some of the opinions that I have. I mean, when you're in this society, when you're asked your opinion, you can't sugarcoat it. No pun intended. But when you sugarcoat it, people see right through it.
Right.
I'm very authentic. I don't have any mean-spirited intentions when I'm critiquing a physique, which I'm actually doing less of these days. You know, I did it for 30 years, right? I'm breaking down these bodybuilders. And now you can't break down a bodybuilder without hurting their feelings.
Right.
And if you hurt their feelings, then their crew comes for you. And now we're in cancel culture. So it's not something that excites me, critiquing another guy at the age that I'm at now.
We're gonna rename you Bittersweet.
Bittersweet sounds
Shawn
good.
Ray.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing.
Bittersweet.
If
Shawn
you
Ray.
don't say what they want to hear, then you're bitter. You know, your opinion's old, it's archaic, and blah, blah, blah. I'm not here to please anybody anymore. At this stage, I'm here to appreciate what's there. And look, what we have is all we can compare it to. We can't keep making the 90s comparisons.
Can I ask you a question? Has anything ever shaken you?
I've never really been shaken in terms of...
You've never been shaken?
In terms of like fear or...
You said something and there was backlash and it just shook you.
Yeah, I mean, this is a sport where so many fragile
You're
egos.
unshakable.
I'm unshakable because look, I also know that in the drug culture that's the underpinnings of our sport, we've got a lot of unstable individuals. I had friends in this sport that have murdered people, and I've had friends in this sport that have been murdered. I've had friends in this sport that have died suddenly. I've had friends that have gotten in fights.
And you openly talk about this.
Yeah. Well, it's a very volatile
industry. You feel
industry.
like it can help people. You feel like openly talking about this can help people coming up.
Well, yeah. I mean, we are a microcosm of society where we're being judged on our appearance.
That's true.
And the premium that we put on our appearance takes away the quality of our character, so that they don't see the individual.
Right.
People have a tendency to think they know me because they read something about me or they heard a soundbite. They're not breaking bread with me. They're not spending any time with me. They've never even been in my company. Maybe they saw me from a distance.
So it doesn't bother you because you know that they don't know you.
They don't know. And that's the downside of celebrity. And it's not just me as a bodybuilder. It's in singers and actors as well. But you know, I don't judge anybody until I've spent some time with them.
You know how rare and unique this is, right?
I don't, because I am totally oblivious to no-name people typing stuff that's negative.
It's rare that somebody is able to plow forward without being shaken, without having fear, and the fact that you own everything that you say. Personally, that is terrifying to me.
Yeah, a lot of people.
And I think most people are like me, where it's like you put a filter on what you say. You feel like you have to. You're so scared, but something that is so interesting about you, it's very rare,
I think,
is that you really don't have a shakable bone in your body.
Well, because the things I say, the opinions I have, they don't come from a place of jealousy.
Right.
I'm not coming for someone because I want to be angry or bitter towards them. So I don't feel the need to apologize if I'm saying, hey, that guy has, I'll use the term bitch tits, right? Where a guy where you can clearly see blatant abuse of the drugs he's on, or, you know, this guy's got a fat stomach, or this guy doesn't belong on this stage, you know, or I say he's not ready for prime time. Because in our industry right now,
you're speaking what you think is
getting
facts.
a pro card's not hard to do if you pick the right show. Sometimes you can pick a show where there's no competition and you're in the pros, and then you get to the pros, and when you walk out, you can clearly see you bit off more than you could chew. As a commentator, I got to say you're not ready for prime time. Yeah. It's not a diss to that individual. He shouldn't be here. It should be harder to get your pro card, and even harder still to get to the Olympia. So if you get there, this is a sport of criticism. You're walking into a sport where we're going to tell you. I'm not sure if you can remember who Simon Cowell is from American Idol, but when it first started, Simon Cowell was looked at the bad guy because he would tell you exactly what was wrong with you. If you
He's
can't
the most
sing,
respected judge on that show now.
Of course, the individuals would come out and they would hear the other event, but they want to hear from Simon Cowell.
You're the Simon Cowell of bodybuilding.
Well, if you want the truth.
Yep.
And that's what Simon Cowell represented on American Idol. And while some people didn't like what he was saying, they appreciated what he was saying because he was telling them things they needed to hear. I tell you what you need to hear.
Well, you know what? I appreciate that. And I think, honestly, like, even when people may feel like they're like may come across as offended, they might go back in time and re-listen to what you say. So honestly, Shawn, you are definitely leaving your mark. You continue to leave your mark. And I appreciate you. We appreciate you. And I
find my way to kind of like stay close to the game without becoming the game.
Yeah.
By working with companies like Mutant, the supplement company, title sponsor of the Arnold Classic, major sponsor of the Olympia. I work with Flex Apparel. They used to be an equipment company. Now they're making Flex clothing. I work with the media, Muscle Insider, writing my views. And I have my own little personal training website, which is buildwithpros.com. In that, you find how I built all of this.
Right.
So I still find ways that I kind of control my own destiny and my own future.
Of course.
By working with companies that are working with the bigger side of the industry. I'm an Olympia consultant.
Yeah.
I'm an Arnold Classic consultant. And then I'm also a promoter. So all of those things allow me the time to continue enjoying what I'm doing.
Right.
In spite of cancel culture.
Right.
In spite of any negative opinions that people have, because I'm in control of my future. And that's the advice I tell the other guys. Get control of your future and also create something that you own, something that they can't take away from you. They may be able to cancel you, but they can't put you in the poorhouse.
Right. Well, bittersweet, Shawn Ray.
Bittersweet.
Bittersweet,
like
Shawn Ray. I thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
And Shawn, you are making your mark.
All right. See you in Hawaii, November 16th.